I feel like I have become the defender-in-chief for my friend Jonathan Choe. If you're not familiar, if you're new to the podcast, Jonathan Choe is a former Seattle TV reporter. He got fired because cancel culture came for him. And he now is a senior fellow with Discovery Institute, which is a conservative think tank, but they started this journalism arm called fixhomelessness.org. And so Jonathan goes around doing really in-depth, really rugged reporting on the homelessness crisis, the drug crisis, the crime crisis. I mean, honestly, even if you are far to the left, I don't see how you look at his stuff and say it's not journalistic. But there's this ongoing debate about whether Jonathan is considered a journalist because he is working for a conservative think tank. And if you're not familiar, I wrote this long, in-depth investigative piece about this whole issue a couple months ago. It's up at Patreon and Locals. And it was the result of months of public disclosure requests. And it looked at how high up Democrats in Washington state were trying to crush independent media dissent like Jonathan Choe by sometimes physically blocking him from press conferences, sometimes, just taking him off press lists or not allowing him to RSVP for press events. There had been 2 high-profile incidents, as you know by now, with Jonathan Choe, both of them involving King County Executive Dow Constantine. In one instance, Dow Constantine fled a room to avoid answering Jonathan Choe's legitimate questions about public safety in Chinatown. And Choe chased him out, and then Dow went down an elevator to avoid the questions. So, the executive who wants to be governor made it much more dramatic than it needed to be. He should have just answered the questions and moved on. And then a month later, the King County executive's staff physically blocked Choe from touring a homelessness facility with the rest of the press. And as if it couldn't get any worse, sometimes I expect that kind of just blatant ideological hypocrisy in Seattle, right? Where they would condemn Donald Trump for what he did and said about the press, but they can treat Jonathan Choe like this. Well, the city of Kirkland, gosh, I love you, Kirkland. I love Kirkland. I think downtown Kirkland is great. Juanita Beach, just wonderful, wonderful suburb of Seattle, safer than Seattle. You're better than this. Oh my God. Okay, this video is going to piss you guys off. And it should piss off everyone. It should piss off every single person who believes in the First Amendment, every single person who supports a free press. In particular, it should piss off journalists. Although I don't see any mainstream journalists, and maybe I've missed some, but any mainstream journalists coming to Jonathan's defense. So a little background here. So Governor Jay Inslee was in Kirkland on Wednesday to talk about efforts it was at Kirkland City Hall, okay? So the People's House in Kirkland, to talk about the opening of a new crisis stabilization center. So I got the press release on this. It was sent on March 7th, so that was Tuesday, events on Wednesday, and at the very bottom it says, credentialed media are welcome to attend. Credentialed media are welcome to attend. And this is how they control what media goes, because they'll say, oh, well, we're not going to give a credential to Jonathan Choe because the governor's office doesn't deem him media. But Jonathan Choe apparently does reach out to the city of Kirkland, gets an email back saying, yep, you're welcome to come, credentialed. And he went there as a freelancer for the Mill Creek View. Some news publications that are outside the mainstream have given him a press credential so he can get past this sort of barrier that he's dealing with. I want you to watch, or if you're on the podcast, listen to what the city of Kirkland's communications director did to Jonathan Choe after Jonathan Choe was already in the event, before the event started. It is unfreaking real.
Who are you?
I'm David Holbrecht.
You're who?
I'm David Holbrecht. I'm the communications program manager.
With who?
The city of Kirkland.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is my credential right here.
Okay, so
I got permission also from Sue Romero, an email saying that she welcomes me, and I have that email. I could be more than happy to prove in.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but you're not a guest here today, and so we'll need you to leave.
Well, I responded to an RSVP and I was given permission. Would you like to see the email?
No, I'm familiar with the email.
Okay.
I was talking with Sue about it.
So why would Sue give me permission?
Yeah, and so it's a matter of credentialing.
Right. My credential is right here. I'm contributing to multiple platforms, and again, I RSVP'd, and I have an email which clearly...
From who?
Sue Romero.
Yeah, from Sue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I have it in writing that I was given permission here, so I'd like to stay and ask a few questions about this project.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Oh, man. So eventually Jonathan's allowed to stay. And he had an email from somebody, I'm assuming, with the city who said, or who didn't know this whole thing with Democrats trying to keep Jonathan Choe from all these press conferences. So Jonathan pushes back. He's like, I'll show you the email. He's got a press credential from Mill Creek View. But to hear this guy from the city of Kirkland, let's go back and play another part of that again.
well, I'm sorry, but you're not a guest here today, and so we'll need you to leave.
Wow. You're not a guest here today. Let's dissect that in a couple different ways. First of all, he has an email saying that he is invited to attend after he asked to attend as a credentialed member of the press. So clearly he is a guest there. You might disagree, and the person who sent the email might disagree with you, but that's not Jonathan's fault. The other thing is, I have no doubt the city of Kirkland is doing someone's bidding here. Now, I have filed a public disclosure request to find out whose bidding that might be. Is it the bidding of the King County Executive's office? Is it the bidding of the governor's office, where they said, hey, if Jonathan Choe shows up, kick him out? I don't think the city of Kirkland, I could be wrong, but I don't think the city of Kirkland did this on their own. I think they're doing someone's bidding. Shame on them. Now, all of that aside, if you are firmly in the camp of, no, he works for a think tank, it's an ideological organization, he's not a member of the press, he shouldn't be credentialed, think about that again. I'm sorry, but you're not a guest here today. May I remind you of where they are? They are at Kirkland City Hall. City Hall. A building paid for by taxpayers, a building meant to serve taxpayers and the public. And the person telling him you're not an invited guest here is also someone who is paid by the taxpayers. So even if you don't consider Jonathan Choe a journalist, for a public servant, quote unquote, to tell anyone in that scenario that you're not an invited guest here, you're not a guest here, you don't get to decide, short of someone breaking the law inside that building, you don't get to decide who's an invited guest. This should bother everyone. It is beyond shameful to me at this point. I mean, I was ashamed of the media the first time they didn't stand up for Jonathan Choe. The second time, I just thought, they're irredeemable. If this were a journalist, even if they worked for some sort of ideological organization, being treated this way by Republicans, it would not be allowed to stand. And that's when we get back to this issue of moral consistency. I've been consistent. That might sound sanctimonious, but I have the receipts. When journalists have been attacked by Donald Trump, Jim Acosta, when he was, revoked of his press credential, when journalists were pepper sprayed down at the state capitol by some anti-lockdown whack job. I don't think being against lockdowns makes you a whack job. I think pepper spraying journalists makes you a whack job, just so we're clear. I've been consistent on this issue. When journalists have been attacked at Trump rallies, that happened a couple times in the Midwest, when journalists like myself were attacked at far left rallies, it shouldn't matter. And above and beyond all of that, a pet peeve of mine, I think it should be against the law. I've said this before. It should be a crime for people we pay with taxpayer funds to actively obstruct us from getting information. And Jonathan is someone who is in the business of disseminating information. So as I said, I have a request in to the city of Kirkland, and I'm taping this show early today. They might get back to me late. If they do, I'll post an update in the comments. I have a request in from them, to them. Let me read you the questions that I laid out for them. To this guy in the video, Mr. Walbrecht. I said, hi, David. Just saw the exchange with Jonathan Choe. I have a few questions. 1, whose decision was it to ask Choe to leave? 2, why was Choe asked to leave? 3, did the King County Executive's office have any communication with you or other City of Kirkland employees about Choe's presence? And 4, did the governor's office have any communication with you or other City of Kirkland employees about Choe's presence? Again, I think the City of Kirkland is a lot better than this. I think they should be above the crazy shit that happens in Seattle and the, how do I even describe Dow Constantine? Thin skin. This thin skin of people like Dow Constantine, who instead of just doing what the mayor of Seattle does when Choe shows up somewhere, politely answers his questions. The thin-skinned King County executive who wants to be a thin-skinned governor can't even tolerate Choe's presence, doesn't even want to answer a question from him. I think the City of Kirkland is better than that. I'm disappointed, and I hope that I hear that I get some answers from them. I don't think that there's a logical explanation. I don't think there's any explanation that could be satisfactory for me, because there's no excuse for that behavior. But hopefully we can get to the bottom of who was pulling the strings.